Hello and welcome to this part of session 4, where we're going to be discussing the uptake of biofuels as marine fuel. And more specifically, we're going to be focusing on a collaboration between Uniper Energy and Neutral Fuels to supply biofuel in Fujairah. Under the terms of an agreement which was announced last November, the companies are blending Uniper's very low sulfur fuel oil and Neutral Fuels biofuel, which is made from used vegetable cooking oil to produce a bunker fuel that meets the ISO 8217-2010 RMG 380 specification. So to give some more detail about the collaboration and to discuss the potential for biofuel as a marine fuel, I'm joined by Gary Hubbard, Chief Commercial Officer of Neutral Fuels, and Lars Liebig, Managing Director of Uniper Energy. So welcome both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, I wonder, first of all, if I could ask you, Gary, to start off the discussion and really kind of give us some context, looking at the market, the current market for biofuels in the UAE, and also looking forward a little to its potential for shipping in that region.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you, Leslie. The UAE has always been pretty progressive in its sustainability agenda. Neutral Fuels has been collecting used cooking oil and converting to biofuels for almost 10 years now. This is our 10th year anniversary. So we sort of led the way out here in the fossil fuel capital of the world by providing biofuels. So with the IMO legislation that kicked in at the beginning of last year, we recognized that there was clearly a place there to support the marine biofuel industry. The panics that were going on looking for scrubber retrofits, deciding whether to go to LNG, were quite challenging in the back end of 2019. So, we developed initially a B20, a 20% biofuel, which we trialed with our clients out here on their offshore vessels, beginning back in February 2020. And we recognize that, with Europe and with Asia as the sort of two leading bunker refueling points of the world, that Fujairah in the UAE is the third largest globally. So if biofuels are available in Europe, if they're available in Asia, then clearly by offering them here in the UAE, that completes the global bunkering map. And working with Uniper and their excellent infrastructure here at the bunkering hub of Fujairah, I think coming together just made a great deal of sense.
Okay, and what sort of uptake generally is there, say, in the land transport sector in the UAE at the moment for biofuels? So
for land and for construction, so, pretty much anything where you can use diesel generators for power for lighting, heavy goods vehicles, local C&D vehicles. The uptake's been fantastic. The 10 years, as I say, we've been here, we work with many of the leading world brand names, the IKEAs, the Nestle's, McDonald's of this world. And they recent approach, certainly across the logistics industry, to support their clients, to look at what they call scope 2 emissions by reducing the carbon footprint of their own distribution networks. It really just has been a tremendous roller coaster over the last few years.
Okay, and if I can bring you in, Lars, now, obviously Uniper has a refinery in Fujairah. It's been producing very low sulfur fuel oil to meet the IMO 2020 mandate. So can you just give maybe a little bit of background about, how you got together with Neutral Fuels and what Uniper sees the future of biofuels to be?
Yes, thanks for the invitation and good morning. Well, I think maybe let's look a little bit back on how we came here, because we started our business only 2015. And when we decided to put our production plant into Fujairah, it was about producing a 0.1% marine fuel oil for the so-called SECA markets, the sulfur emission control areas, and that market got implemented 2015, January 15. And the idea was to supply Singapore and Europe out of Fujairah, which was a big step because there was no low sulfur fuel oil around here in that region. And we knew that eventually at some point the 0.5% VLSFO regulation will kick in, but at that time it wasn't clear whether it's January 2020, which was ultimately the date it kicked off, or at a later point in time. But we were betting on the fact that those regulations will get stricter, and sulfur levels will have to go down globally on all fuels, and particularly on the marine sector. And we wanted to serve that market and provide, a product which meets these regulations. And going forward, we clearly believe it's not the end. Regulations will get tighter over time. And the next step for the marine sector will be to reduce their carbon emissions. The IMO 2020 was about sulfur emissions, which is more of a local problem, whereas, as we all know, carbon is a worldwide issue. And yeah, we like to be still on the front foot of this, and keep driving that idea of providing solutions for a more carbon neutral fuel for the marine industry as well. We can't produce it on the site we have. It is still based on conventional fuels and crude oils, obviously. But we think the whole industry has to transition, and we have to be open for, such sort of corporations, and offer solutions to our clients and customers, and show them that it's doable already now. It will be a price issue for some, but I think we see already that a lot of customers are looking into this direction, and they want to show that they are doing something. It's not only a price driver, but it's also a political driver behind it, for organizations and for countries. And yeah, I think that's what brought us together. We didn't want to wait until a regulation forces us to do it. We wanted to see what we can achieve already now.
Okay, and maybe if we could just look a little bit at the moment at the actual product that you're manufacturing and you're offering to the market. I mean, are there any challenges in terms of blending a biofuel with a very low sulfur fuel oil? I don't know whether Uniper's VLSFO is a very blended product, or it's more of a straight run product. I mean, are there any challenges in that blending process?
We haven't encountered any so far. So our own product, the very low sulfur fuel oil, is to a very high extent a straight run material. So we are producing our residue, which is the main component, based on crude oil, and it's a simple distillation process. So this is a straight run residue stream, and we are blending this mainly with other straight run fuel oils from particular refineries where we source it. So the quality is very high, it's very stable. And when we started blending neutral fuels B100 into it in different proportions, it came out excellent as well. So the two work very fine together. We haven't seen any issues, and the final quality is still meeting the marine bunker fuel specification. So from a specification point of view, it's fine, and also from a pure quality perspective, we haven't encountered any issues. Of course, it is a big concern for any ship owner to switch to a certain fuel. We have seen that when all these regulatory changes occurred, suddenly people shy away from new products which look a bit different. So we get a lot of questions right now on certain test results, and we're happy to share all of those. So we understand that there are concerns, but we also like to address it and be very transparent on the qualities.
Okay, and then Gareth, come to you. I mean, in terms of, I think you mentioned the product you have already that's in the B20 with 20%, ratio. I mean, what sort of ratio are you looking at for the bunker fuels?
Yeah, I think one of the things I would just add to what Lars was saying, and another reason why we, I guess we were really excited to work with Uniper, was that their level of quality matched our own. Compliance in fueling industry is the absolute byword. You can never, ever, ever make a mistake. And our B100 meets and exceeds the American standards for biofuel, the European standards, and we're the only company in the GCC to hold the ESMA UAE standard for B100. So, the fact that when we came together with Uniper and their high grade, very low sulfur oil, it was really just a matter of looking at the percentages. So, you know, for many of our clients here in the UAE, they'll take 100% biofuel, or they'll take, for the maritime clients, 20% biofuel. I think Lars and his team and our scientists have been working together to offer predominantly two differing types of maritime biofuel for the industry. And again, as Lars alluded to, you know, sometimes it's a price point issue. So I think we're hovering now around the sort of 10% and the 20% in terms of the two different products that the carriers can take for their vessels. The work we've done has all been on 20%, and it's been predominantly on Cummins engines. And yeah, you know, we've got many nautical miles and many millions of tons of information behind us over the last year. And now moving on to the larger stage with Uniper and Fujairah, the future looks very bright.
Okay. And I mean, it's probably early days, isn't it? I mean, I think you kind of announced the agreement, as I mentioned, in November. So it's, you know, 2-3 months down the line. But I mean, what has been the market feedback so far to the product launch? Maybe Lars, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, maybe just on the blend again. We think a 10 to 20%, as Gary said, is easily doable. You have to see that what we see on our standard customers at the moment. A lot of them prefer a high viscosity product. The pure B100 is a typical low viscosity product, like a distillate. So if you blend a lot into a high viscosity product, it will drop the viscosity, and some ship owners might not like that. But we see it at 10 and 20%, we can still maintain a very high viscosity, which helps for the lubricity of the oil, and the engines are running smoother than if you go like the big, I'm talking like seagoing vessel engines, so they not like a motorboat or something. So they need a certain high viscous product, or that's what they prefer. Otherwise, they have to change lube oils and so on. So that was the idea why we target 10 to 20%, but we can easily go higher. It really depends on what the ship owners at the end want. Now to your question on the demand side, we got a lot of questions. I mean, they go sometimes direct to Neutral Fuels, sometimes direct to us or to both of us, and we try to answer all those questions which come up. As I said, ship owners or other clients who approach us, they are particularly interested in the way it's produced. So they want to see certifications, they want to have some samples on their own, do their own tests. So that all takes some time, obviously. But the feedback is very positive so far. The people are very interested to see what we can offer and what the price points are, and you know, in which stems and lot sizes it's available and so on. So I think it will take still a while until we you know, get to a point where people get really confident to do their purchases and go ahead with it. But it's a matter of time, I think.
Okay, I mean, can I, you know, put that question to you as well, Gary? And also, I mean, Lars, you know, is the issue of you know, viscosity and you know, running through engines. I mean, you know, using biofuels, are there any issues with OEM warranties or things like that?
No, there's not, and it's an interesting one, because when we use B100 as opposed to standard 10 ppm diesel that you and I would buy at the local petrol stations, or in Europe certainly it's more of a B7 now. You can't buy a B0 diesel anymore. The lubricity is tenfold. So the lubricity aspect of B100 is far superior to standard diesel, but obviously with a very low sulfur, then that adds another dimension. There's a lot of misunderstandings about any kind of new technology. So if people don't understand, unfortunately, they'll go to Google or Wikipedia, and that doesn't always give people the right, you know, the right understanding. I would always fall back on the fact that if you can meet the global compliance standards and all of the millions and millions of tons of fuel that we provided in 10 years, never having one single issue with one single engine or genset, then the answer is no. You know, I sat in conferences last year with Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, with Ford and Scania, and each of the representatives on the panel at that point said, you know, this is the short-term future. Yes, EV might be popular for the roads going forward, but we all know the challenges with it. if you want to make an impact now, here, today, and not destroy your cost base, then you simply move to biofuel from standard diesel. So they've all been very, very supportive. But like within any industry, and as Lars sort of alluded to, you will always have some naysayers. You will always have a lack of credible information. And like with many products, biofuel is different all over the world. How it's refined in Asia is very different to how we refine it here. So, you know, even within the standard terms of FAME or UCOM, you have different grades and better standards. And I'm pleased to say ours meets the very top of all of those standards.
Okay, and maybe, you know, we can move on and look at, you know, the well-rehearsed arguments, but, you know, look at the drivers for uptake as well as the challenges for, you know, switching to biofuel. You know, obviously you've got the immediate benefits of your GHG emission, you know, reduction potential. You've got, you know, an established supply infrastructure, fuel supply infrastructure, you know, and we've got over the problems of, I think, the first generation biofuels. You know, the second generation advanced biofuels are, you know, are much more acceptable, I think, to the market in general. I just wondered if we can look about, you know, where that push is going to come from in terms of the market, and look at what stakeholder pressure is beginning to do in terms of driving the uptake of new fuels. Maybe Lars, do you want to sort of, you know, we've seen companies like DHL, VW, IKEA kind of really coming into the argument and saying, you know, we want the ships that are carrying our goods to be using cleaner fuels. I mean, you know, how do you think that pressure can translate, Lars, into an uptake of biofuels?
Yeah, it already does. And obviously, compared to conventional fuels, the demand is still relatively small, but it is growing, I think, at a very high pace. And the reason is, as you said, there are a lot of big corporations. They want to have their whole supply chain carbon neutral, or at least work towards such a goal. And they're not. It's not enough for them to just say, I buy some carbon credits to offset my footprint. I want to have my suppliers show me that the whole chain is in fact carbon neutral, and that is a trend not only in this, you know, in the transport sector. We see this in power generation, power supply contracts as well. So in different areas in the energy industry. So I think that is what's driving it. It's coming from big corporations at the moment who have clear targets for themselves, and they cascade it down to their suppliers, and those suppliers need to go to certain logistic providers who transport their goods, and those logistic providers go to certain bunker suppliers who need to supply this fuel, and those bunker suppliers need to go to certain producers, and this is how it ends up on our table, right? So it really goes down this value chain, and that's probably the right thing for now to you know, the right case. Of course, on top there could be a regulatory political pressure at some point, and that might come in certain areas of the world. Here we don't have any subsidies at the moment. You know, we need to rely on really the demand coming. But as I said, I think it is already growing and coming.
Okay, and you've mentioned obviously the issue of costs, and that's an issue that, you know, everybody always seems to raise. So maybe if I can, you know, come to you, Gary, and look at that in a little bit more detail. You know, obviously the European market, to some extent the US market, you do have incentives, or you're given targets. You know, you have to include so much biofuel in your annual fuel consumption. You know, looking at the UAE market, which, as Lars says, doesn't have that incentivization. You know, how do you think you can overcome the plain fact that, you know, biofuels cost a lot more than, you know, traditional bunker fuels?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And, you know, I hate to repeat myself, but Lars is absolutely right. You know, the governmental pressures within countries to meet the targets they've all signed up to in the Paris Accords is one very, very strong influencer. The clients, and, you know, you mentioned DHL, DSV, equally as passionate, IKEA, Nestle. Again, these companies have all got very, very strong and stringent carbon emission reduction targets, some for 2025, some for 2030, some yet out there in 2050. mean, you look the likes of Maersk, your likes of CMA, they're already running on biofuels, and they're already recognizing that that is a differentiator for their customer base and their customers' customer base. So, you have the political pressure, you have the carriers' willingness to want to differentiate themselves, which generally comes with a cost. You have the carriers' clients, be it the forwarding organizations, who are committed to supporting the end users, their retail clients or FMCG clients. So they're all pushing in the right direction. And then you've got us, the consumers, and as the father of two sort of teenage, almost 20-year-old boys, I can tell you now, these people vote with their feet as well. They want to see and hear that the product that they're purchasing is coming from a sustainable source. It's cost effective, as clearly you need to be, but cost effective doesn't mean as cheap as things was yesterday. If you look to the global containerized market at the moment and you see the challenges from a cost perspective that all organizations globally are going through, the differential between a VLSFO and a biofuel blend is actually minuscule in comparison. And when you then start analysing it and breaking it actually down to the units that sit within the boxes that travel on the vessels, it really is a very, very small amount. And I think once you move beyond, again, the ignorance and the doom and gloom, people recognise that. People who have a vested interest in sustaining what's left of our planet for the next generation, the generation after that, they recognise that T-shirt may need to cost, a few cents more to make sure it's sustainable and it's here for the generations to come. So there's a groundswell that's been building up on road distribution, it's building up on aviation, and it's been building up in green construction for many years now. The maritime industry arguably has been a little late to the party. As Lars said, in 2015-16, they set up not knowing when the IMO restrictions were going to kick in. Well, they have kicked in, and people have bought into them in the industry, and it's only going to get faster and faster from here on in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've looked at costs, but the other issue that people always raise is that of scalability. If the demand's there, is there enough biofuel to meet that demand? And is it not always going to be, or as it seems to be at the moment, it's fairly regionalised, fairly localised demand. So, how do you see a kind of global infrastructure of biofuels developing? Do you think that's feasible in the short term, near term?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that there already is one. And I would task anybody that dials into this conference to go to their kitchen and tell me that they can't find at least a small pot of cooking oil that's being used in their everyday lives. Every restaurant, no matter how healthy that we go to, will have some kind of cooking oil element in it. So, the one thing that we would never canvass is virgin oils. So, creating plantations to destroy plantations to create the oil for biofuel is something we would never countenance. And as Lars said also, carbon credits is something we don't really think is the answer either. But, every time you order in a takeaway, if you're in some kinds of lockdown, you go to a restaurant, a shopping mall, a fast food, a hotel, then oil is being used in the production of the food that we all consume, not only in local premises, but also in industrial production as well. So regardless of how healthy we're becoming, oil is becoming healthier too, and stretching a lot further. So there's already a global network in place. Yes, there's subsidies in Europe. Yes, there are some subsidies in North America, but the network's already in place. And the amount of feedstock is actually already in place, providing you have the infrastructures developed to be able to collect and refine it.
Okay, and finally, we're hearing an awful lot of discussion about marine energy transition at the moment, and the concept of a transition, and I think there's a growing realization that we're not going to get from A to Z, immediately. We're not going to get to very low carbon or net zero, within the space of a few years. So, do you see biofuels as purely an interim solution, or do you think it's, got more longevity in terms of the marine energy transition as a whole? What do you think, Lars?
mean, I don't know where the limit is, to be frank, if there is a limit to the supply, for instance, on used cooking oil based material. But it doesn't matter whether we can supply the whole market with that, or whether at some point we need to switch to other carbon neutral alternatives, then they would come on top in addition, right? So, and I think use of biomass generally makes sense, right? As Gary said, it's part of our day-to-day life. It doesn't make sense to at some point say, well, now we start consuming those biofuels, and then 10 years from now we stop it again. No, I mean, we will continue doing it the more we develop it, right? And it will become part of our, just the day-to-day life we deal with this. And if the demand is not enough, we will go with, we will develop other alternatives to cover that demand. And there are already a lot of talks about, other suitable fuels for the marine market. I mean, ammonia, green methanol, to mention two. So, but those will take a lot of time. So biofuels are a great product to transition as well, but I don't think we will lose them after the transition has happened.
Okay, that's a good point to end, I think. But we've not had very long to explore the whole issue of biofuels. But thank you very much indeed for your insights. It's been really useful. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.